Good morning. Obviously, you know me, Richard Bartlett from Export and Lots. We're going to be doing the Fridays now. Fridays, as we all start to relax for the weekend. It's the first week back from our holidays, and it's been an unusual one, hasn't it? So I'm going to try and keep it. I'm going to try and keep the newsletters now within 15 minutes because there's a lot of information on here. But it's nice just to be able to show you, and you can watch the YouTube videos if you don't want to read the policies. We've decided to do the Monday to Friday, just a pure intelligence briefing because we just think it's easier and there's a lot more information we can show on there, which I think's important. What we're seeing in the intelligence at the moment, we're seeing obviously a lot of policies, customs and compliance markets. And I'm going to go through these just to give you a rundown of where I see. Obviously, policy, we're seeing a lot of trade agreements. So obviously the UK is very keen on doing trade agreements and making sure obviously there's a benefit to an exporter and also to the importer. But you've got to remember from that becomes customs, compliance, markets and enforcement. They all follow patterns. So again, just make sure that you're following origins. Don't get too wrapped up with origins where if you don't have an origin of the UK, you can't trade. Of course you can trade. You just trade in a slightly different way. Your customs just becomes a bit more challenging because obviously there's duty charges there. So you negotiations with your buyer becomes completely different because your buyer then is going to have to pay a fee for your products. So your commercial invoice of £40,000 may have anything between 2 and a 12% duty charge on that. He won't want to pay that. So he'll force you down a negotiation. He might force you into your Incoterms. So again, these are the key things as you start to watch the videos to start to really understand it, really educate you. Just be careful with Incoterms. Make sure you don't agree to the silly ones that really leave you very much exposed as an exporter in a lot of ways. And again, we have courses, we have training courses and videos on all these things. We are going to be doing some snippet ones as we go along in the week if you want to watch. It's new, the channel. But we think there's a real gap there there isn't a gap, I would say, for the trade news. It's the gap is somebody actually explaining it to you because we see all this, all this information. But what does it actually mean to you as an exporter, an international trade advisor, or as an importer? How does it affect you? So again, we're going to cover them key areas. Policy updates. We saw some big updates overnight or this week in force with Sri Lanka with the DCTS. So we're seeing some policy changes there, some releases on customs and international enforcement data. So what does that mean? It means that a preference-based market creating the opportunity for business to reduce costs through tariff preference. What does that mean? Well, basically it means that under a tariff preference, if you're an importer, if there's deals that are to be done for the UK where they reduce the duty, say Sri Lanka, if you're buying clothing, apparel, you would normally pay quite a high percentage on that. Obviously, under the DCTS, they're reducing that risk a lot better for you, so you can actually bring the goods in at a much less, even zero rated product. So it allows you to be competitive in the market because obviously, we're stung in the UK, as with taxes and everything else. And, the last thing we need is extra duties and VAT. VAT you can claim back. And you've got postponed VAT, which I think is a great system as long as it's not abused. And as long as you understand when you're doing postponed VAT, you are accounting for it. Amazing how many people don't understand. You have a trade portal now through HMRC on your government gateway. You must log into it and you must check all the data in there. The amount of audits I've done in the last probably year where people have never logged onto it or never even seen it, where I've helped them, it takes 2 minutes. Just make sure you're ahead because obviously you have a responsibility. So just always make sure on them key areas. Again, global customs, a significant increase in the frequency of depth of forced clearance audits. It's right because throughout the history of audits and everything else, it doesn't change. We all find ways, and we might reluctantly be doing things that we weren't aware that we were doing. You might be relying very much on your freight forwarder, and your freight forwarder isn't a specialist. He's moving the goods, so he'll only go off what he's been given. So again, don't assume that your freight forwarders, they're there to move your goods. Always remember that. I always have these discussions, being a freight forwarder himself, moving goods. It's their responsibility to move your goods in a quick, efficient, safe manner to deliver your goods to the customer. If they get stuck for whatever reason, unless they've done something historically wrong, it's normally the issue with the exporter or the importer. The freight forwarder can only rely on the information you're given. So again, and again, if you're working with freight forwarders, some freight forwarders will use other freight forwarders, so it goes down a chain. So it might that you've done everything right, but it might be then under your under the kind of passing on, it loses an invoice or it loses something, and then it gets stuck somewhere because somebody's not passed it on to the freight forwarder or the logistics company who's actually moving the goods. So again, just be careful on that. High volume sectors, particularly those with complex supply chains, don't be put off. There are always ways around things. It's like we're here to make companies export and import as freely as they can, so we can get them figures up. We can get your figures up. We can get your exports really, really performing without the worries of all the compliance and areas around there. And if you're an importer, again, making sure that you're doing the correct things. You're not bringing goods in where it's been returned and you're referring it, you send it out. You've got no systems in place, no inward processing or anything. You're leaving yourself wide open. You might not get an audit, but you might do. So it's one of them, innit? That you want to do it the right way or the wrong way. We all take gambles, don't we? And it's a gamble. It's up to you. We can't force, or I can't force anybody to do the things. I can only encourage you to do the right things. On our signal and our trade intelligence, obviously the hub's starting to work now. It's very exciting actually. What the information it's given us, I'm quite excited by what it can do. Just not quite ready yet. I'm just doing some more testing because there's within the hub there's about 12 different fields within the hub, so you've got to get them all kind of. So some will come live and then some will come later. But at the moment, it's very positive. And if we're talking AI or anything, happy to discuss it because I've designed this completely myself. I've programmed it, I've written it, I've coded it, I can code, so I can talk about AI and what the benefits are. But again, it's understanding that you get a lot of negative. AI does support you. Use it as a support mechanism, not as a. There's things I can't get this kind of information. With it'll take me 3 days to get 1 page of information, or even 4 days of research. That's what it used to take us. I can do that now because I'm programming. I've taught, I've spent 3 years in the last 2 years teaching. I call him or her. It's not real, but to me, it's real because I've been teaching it, and I'm starting to really see them benefits. So again, don't underestimate. We're doing a course on AI this year. We've got quite a few AI trade courses on to show you how to use it for marketing and other areas. So again, drop me a mail. So signal preference against enforcement. What does that mean? A preference utilizing rising across UK trade flows. Audit activity is rising faster than trade volumes. Customers are deploying sophisticated data analytics identity. So that, they're using the same thing. They're checking. You've got to make sure when you're doing your documents, your invoicing and your customs, that everything matches. If you're using preference, so what's a preference? A preference is where you as an exporter or an importer are dealing with a country where there's a trade preference in there. It could be DCTS, it could be the old GSP in the old days, now DCTS. It could be the CPTPP agreement. It could be a deal with our trade agreements with Canada and other countries, or our new trade agreement with India. Under that, there's a preference, and there's certain things you have to adhere to make sure when you get the goods, you get them at a reduced price, not under third country duty. And people say, well, what's third country when it's around? Well, you trade. So if you want to trade and trade in the correct manner, you trade preference if there's a trade deal and you've got all the backup documents to support that. But if you can't trade, of course you can trade, but you just now trade under the World Trade Organization, WTO, and under there you've got the fixed within the third country duty. That's why you always see third country duty. And that's a fixed duty charge that the importer, either you as the importer in the UK or your buyer as your exporter pays. So again, it's very important. Origin evidence, I can't, it's a real key area, this origin, and you really need to understand it. So again, origin basically means of how you've created your origin. If I'm a manufacturer and I'm bringing all my goods in, and literally I'm just putting things that I'm assembling, I'm not actually physically changing the origin, or I'm assembling. I'm doing enough assembling work to change the origin. There's only that. I can't, I haven't got a magic wand. But if you're then bringing lots of supply, if you're bringing a lot of raw material in, sorry, and when I mean raw material, I mean lots and lots of bits coming in, and then you put it into your manufacturing process, you're creating a product from that. That is normally substantial amount of origin change. But again, it depends on what you're bringing in, the values, the origin of the goods. Again, you should have all that listed. It's very important when you're doing this because if a customs officer comes in, or sorry, HMRC come in, they're not coming in for the sake of it, just they want to know how you've got systems in place. So again, I keep going on and on about this, but you should check it and again do the supply chain diagnostics. It's 400 quid. It'll give you the answers and it'll give you the checklist. It'll give you that starting point, or look at the trade hub going forward. Again, UK DCS reform. So what's changed? 100% global sourcing now permitted for qualifying goods, two-stage manufacturing. So they're making it easier. So the UK, if you look at the DCTS, I think it's worth about 700 million that they've saved importers. So DCTS, the Development Countries Trading Scheme. So that means that when you're importing, you're importing from developing countries. So there'll be a list. Used to be the old GSP, General Systems Preference under WTO. We've created our own DCTS, and there'll be a list of countries in there. And them countries, there'll be a list of what the duty charge is, and most of it's zero. So there's a real benefit to look at your sourcing if you don't want to deal with China. China's obviously not in there. It was a GSP, believe it or not, in the early 80s. And look at the powerhouse it's become. But there are countries, even India is still in the DCTS, but obviously you don't get full zero duty rates on that. But we have the benefit because obviously we have hopefully a trade deal in place with India. So the development trading scheme, they're just trying to make it a lot more simpler for importers to reduce your cost. So on one hand, they're charging taxes, but on the other hand, they're trying to reduce cost because obviously they generate huge amounts of money that comes into the UK. VAT, duty. I know VAT is kind of acclaimable, but it's still a cost that comes in. Again, look at your complex supply chain operators, see how it's all working, and make sure you pull ahead of the game there. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat now. Customs and for what customs authority they're looking at. I've just said preferences. Suppliers declarations. Most people don't even know what a supplier declaration is. You tell them, have you got a supplier's declaration? Look at you like with 12 heads. It's like, what? And again, it's part of your process. And this is one of the biggest challenges as an SME, and I understand it, is that you'll have three people in an office who have never done customs and never done exporting or importing, and they'll be getting three prices from the freight forwarder, and you don't put any emphasis on it. But then down the line, when you have an audit and you end up spending 30 or 40,000 pounds in fines because you've not done things correctly, it seems a lot of money to spend when you could have invested that money wisely and got yourself in place. And trust me, the people who do this really are the companies that really thrive. Yeah, they make mistakes. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but learn from them mistakes. Invoice, Incoterms mismatches. Your invoice is what you're selling your product at. Transfer pricing, all these things. If you're selling it to your company in Spain or whoever it's going to, and then distribute it then, or a distributor, make sure your pricing is correct. He wants to obviously make his money, so he'll buy it from you, and then he'll sell it at a profit margin. If he's an agent, he's working on a basis of a percentage. So again, just you've got to start understanding how invoice. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at, does that invoice match what your product is? Post clearance audit. So again, duty targeting historical declarations. Trust me, this is a nightmare. And I think this is a big challenge for a lot of you people out there. In 2021, as a customs trainer, we was allowed, or sorry, companies were allowed to do simplified declarations. Simplified declarations was not real, so origins and all these things. Some did it really well, but there was a lot of pressure on a lot of freight forwarders and customs, so they simplified everything. When you're having an audit, they're going back to 2021 or 2020, 2021, 2022. If you can't prove your customs, especially on the preference, where you was like saying that there wasn't a REX number for the EU, because obviously the EU were just getting used to the REX, and you was allowed to do it as an owner, so you was confident that them products that was coming from your supplier was of EU origin. Well, I bet you bottom dollar you need to have that checked, because this is something that's going to haunt a lot of people, and there's going to be some big fines. HMRC will be ruthless on this. Trust me, they'll be on it. If you can't prove, you'll get fined. I was involved with a case in 2023 on something similar to this, but it was more to do with GSPs. And we're talking a fine of just over 2.4 million. And I'm not lying there, 2.4 million. I've been involved with another company that's over £500,000 fine, and they had to pay it. And I've been involved with another company recently who are hitting around the 2 million mark. And again, it all backdated to these old preferences and audit recoveries where they're looking at your data, they're looking at your information, your customs declarations. Again, if you're claiming zero duty or you're claiming something, you must check to make sure it's been done correctly. I'm trying to fine you, but trust me, you don't want this harm to you. Real customs enforcement. I've started to now just highlight this. We found one £3.2 million fine, incorrect origin declaration breach involving multiple shipments. I've seen it. I've seen this firsthand with Lithuania, with clothing going into Lithuania, the company getting fined over £300,000. You must make sure you know that what that origin is. It's very important. If that traceability comes back to you, HMRC will be certainly talking to you. So again, there was a fine. Why it matters, historical preference, recommend that review suppliers' origin files immediately. Check your file system. Whatever you do, start checking your old data. It's very important. Don't just put it in a cupboard because HMRC will want to see all this, so make sure you've got all the documents. Are we seeing a shift? What kind of shift are we seeing? So our data is telling us, our market data that we're constantly reviewing every day, is our preference, our imports, as you can see here, is going on up on preference. That means there's less duty being charged by HMRC. Apparel index, so baseline is apparel, as in clothing, stuff like that, is increasing in 2025. But actually, the real shocking one, or the real one to worry about, is that audit frequency. Look at this. Look at the challenges there. It's doubled more than any of the others. So a lot more audits. So again, just get yourself, make sure you're fully prepared. Again, apparel, high preference. Again, it all to do when you've got a supplier. It's very important to understand how the supplier works. Again, make sure you've got the evidence. It's very, very important because it's complex. Sourcing is complex. You need to understand where, if he's exporting to his clothing, where is he getting that stuff from in Bangladesh? Where are they buying that fabric from? You need to understand where the fabric's from, how they've made it, but how they've created the origin. Do they have certificates to back it up? Do they have Chamber of Commerce certificates of origin, or are they just giving it you as a subline to just say yes, it's an origin of Bangladesh or whichever other countries it is? Particularly in apparel, because high duty between 10 and 15%, trust me, that'll be backdated to you if it's wrong. So again, if you're in apparel, make sure you're checking that. Student entrepreneur, we're seeing universities now getting much more educational when it comes to trade. We're seeing export programs growing. Again, we see them growing. I'm never convinced they work, a lot of these. You know, you could have people with the experience when they're delivering these kind of programs. You know, in my experience, they're not. And I'm just being brutally honest there. And that's why it fails. People say, oh, yeah, it's done fantastic. Well, let's see the data. Let's see, why does nobody ever check data? If you've seen 12 companies and you've done a program with them, what data from that company is showing an increase in the export traffic? You know, let's start looking at data. That's why AI works, because it gives you that quick response. Customs practice gap, despite education expense gap remains, it's huge. Companies need to invest in this. You need to not just keep relying on your freight forwarder. Like I said, will do everything they can for you because they want you as a customer and they'll look after you, but it's not their responsibility. If there's a fine, direct representation, they'll just push it back to you. You know, they won't hesitate unless they're representation three, where they'll show the fine. If it's direct representation, they'll just push it back to you and say they've met all the obligation of what you've given. So again, education is very important. Trade history, early preference schemes, it says without uptake. The general systems preference launched now is to provide developing countries with preference market access. The modern parallel is now the DCTS. Today's challenge most historical. It's never changed. When I do history lessons, and it doesn't, you know, it's amazing how it doesn't change. You know, there were issues. I mean, for instance, the the very clever Romans came up with a great idea when they was exporting wines, that they would import the wines from countries like Spain and other countries. They would then top it up into their bottles and then produce it as if it's one of theirs. And that created an origin, because obviously don't forget it wasn't all Europe, etc. So there wasn't any charges because it was coming directly from Italy or Rome or however we say it. And there was a saving there. But actually it was wrong. You know, there's even cases where China, they would use the Silk Road and they would actually stop off in Egypt and other places so they could reduce the duty and they could do things so you thought the goods were actually coming from somewhere else. Obviously, this is board. Obviously, it wasn't sophisticated like it was now. So everybody does different things. So again, look at your preferences and look at and make sure you're understanding agreements, etc. The book club, we're going to spend a bit of time on that as we go along, but obviously I'm just quickly going through this. I'm going to pick a book out. I apologise to people who like reading the book. It's just been a bit of a mad week because we've been getting the YouTube channel up and running, and we're just trying to get there. Again, two forces: trade policy expands access, customer informant protects, business that understand wins. So what they're saying is understand your trade policies, understand your customs enforcement. So again, understand what the risks are and then understand what your procedures and preferences. So on a supply chain, you can start to be more active, you can be more efficient within your supply chain. There's plenty of people who can support you on this. So that if you're a small business, it doesn't cost a fortune, you can get somebody in who can support you. Hopefully, our trade intelligence will do a lot of this work for people, and it will support you. But you still need that manpower. You still need to speak to a human being who understands your business. Validate origin, align invoices, monitor enforcements at before or outside. That's our kind of our Bible, as we say it every time. I hope you're enjoying this. And like I say, I keep trying to get it in 50 minutes, but it's difficult because I like to explain things in a bit more detail. Have a great Friday, have a great weekend. Look forward to see you on Monday. Please enjoy and drop us a note if you've enjoyed it. If you don't enjoy it, drop us a note. There's always people who never quite like things, but I've got big shoulders. I've been doing this 30 odd years. To be honest now, nothing bothers me. I'm only here to try and support you and give you as much information as I can and support your journey. So thanks everybody. Have a good weekend. And like I say, hopefully we'll see you on Monday. And we're just going to stop the recording. There we are.